Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special edition of Real Talks. I'm your host, David Steele, along with Kyle, and I just got out of probably one of the best movies of the year, if not the best movie of the year, definitely in the top 4 or 5, and it was Avatar: The Way of Water. Oh my God. All I gotta say, ladies and gentlemen, is if you get a chance, go see this in 3D. That's all. And we'll get into that in a couple of minutes. But so off the top, when you've seen the film, obviously, because you're here. When did you see it?
I saw it last night, and I saw it in 2D. I saw it in 2D. And it was a little weird to see it in 2D because I've only seen Avatar, the first film, in 3D. So in theaters, that is. But I thought of seeing it in 2D first, just to see, what's it like to just see it regular without, the 3D. And then I'll go and try the 3D on my second viewing. And it did not disappoint, David. It did not disappoint.
I going into this, I said, okay. I mean, I got to be honest. I didn't have the biggest expectations. I mean, everybody had said, oh my God, this is, miraculous. And so I went to see it in 3D, and I just, wow. I mean, I just put a tweet out a couple of minutes ago. The visuals, talk about popping. Oh my God, just so, I mean, and it didn't seem like 3 hours at all. Mm-hmm. We're going to get into not every little nook and cranny, but the major portions of them. So overall, give me your thoughts on the film overall first. Start.
Okay. I love the movie. For me, what really impressed me were the children, because that was the big feat I think they had to address, where you're not just talking about a sequel. Sequels are something that we always see in Hollywood. But how do you do a sequel where you're focusing on not one, not two, but 5 children? And they're actually even more, more so teenagers, but more teenage actors in the movie outside of the main 5. And I was so impressed by how each one of them got something to do, and they were given an interesting character that wasn't, oh, this is a stereotypical kid. Of course you had the leader. Nateyam was the leader of the kids. And then you had the little sister that always ran around, Took. And then you had Loic, the rebellious kid. But the way they were portrayed, acted, and even just designed, they all were so different and unique in their own ways. It reminded me, and you might laugh at this, and I haven't really discussed this, but it reminded me of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's a pretty good analogy.
The rebellious one, the leader, the smart one, and that is what you kind of get from these kids. And I was struck by how good the actors were, because when you're standing toe-to-toe with Kate Winslet and Zoe Saldana and Sam Worthington, who I think gives his career best performance in this movie, to even an actor like a Sigourney Weaver, who, my God, David, let's talk about Sigourney Weaver for a second, because what a performance. We're talking about an actress in her 60s, I believe, when she was making this movie, playing a 14-year-old child. What did you think of Kiri?
It was unbelievable. You hit the nail on the head. Everything about this, from the story to the kids to, having, Jake, our main protagonist, be a father, to, it just, everything was so good. And I got to say one thing. When I saw, the only time, so I've seen Avatar after this many years, but when I saw Avatar, one of the things that really, I don't want to say bothered me, but I kind of didn't like is for the first 90 minutes of the film, they're beating you over the head with this theme of, save the environment, save the environment, save the environment. And not that I totally understand the theme. However, in this movie, we get that, but it's not to the same extent. And I really appreciated that. And, so getting to your point about Kiri, she was amazing. Sigourney Weaver was amazing. But, it just, overall, the film, it didn't seem like 3 hours at all. I mean, some movies you sit in there and you go, oh, this is 3 hours. And it just drags and drags and drags. You're like, okay, when is this going to be over? And this just moved and it flowed and everything else. Yeah.
It was so
just
massive.
worked.
Like, that's the thing about this movie. It is truly a spectacle, an epic work of art where you do not feel like it's kind of running through the same story beats that the first film ran through, because I've seen some criticism saying that it is a bit of a copy and paste of the plot from the first film. I wholeheartedly disagree on that. There are so many things that are different in this movie that change what they did in the first film, to the point where even the idea of, abandoning their home and then meeting another tribe of Na'vi, where they end up basically learning more about the rest of the world of Pandora, is, I think, really, really interesting. Like, especially how you see Pandora in this movie as a much bigger world than it was in the first Avatar. Because in the first Avatar, you get a little bit more Pandora when Jake tries to gather the 20 clans to stop the Sky People at the end of the movie. But it's a montage, and it's done so quick that you don't quite understand. Like, that is one portion of that world. That is like a fraction of how big Pandora actually is. And there's an entire, like, reef tribe of Pandora known as the Metacane. And the Metacana tribe, they have different skin color. Like, they are visually different than the Omatakae tribe, which Jake's from. And their ways of kind of religion, in a sense, but also the ways of how they fight is different than the other tribes. And I mean, I love everything underwater in this movie.
Oh my God. Can we talk about the water for a minute?
Yes.
So Weta, okay, for all those that don't know, Weta is the one of, if not the major effects house that did this. And of course, they were one of the several effects houses that did the new Lord of the Rings series. But so you thought they were swimming in water. Yeah. And it just, the underwater scenes and how they came out, and it just, I mean, they actually, correct me if I'm wrong, or I read something, or you may have said something, they actually had a patent.
Yeah.
They put a patent together to actually do this, so it couldn't be, it was proprietary stuff, but it was just unbelievable. So, yeah.
Like,
overall,
what's really cool about it is it's actually actors in motion capture underwater holding their breath. I believe Kate Winslet held her breath for 7 minutes. She held a record. And you see these actors that are actually doing this, and I mean, you would just think it's just, visual effects. But there are moments in the movie, like when Kiri is underwater, it's just so breathtakingly beautiful, unlike anything you've ever seen. And the colors, David. This movie had, I think, every color known to man in it, from the greens, to the blues, to the reds, to the yellows. There's the end of the film. I mean, this is a spoiler cast, so we can talk about spoilers. When Neteyam dies and they put him in that yellow bottom of the sea, the reef. It is so beautiful.
Yeah, and it was just unbelievable. And so, I mean, the thing I'll say is this. So we were on a space the other day with somebody, and they were talking about. So I want to talk about Spider for a minute. And Spider was one of the children / teenagers that was there with the kids.
Yeah.
And Dimitri actually came and he had said that you knew what he did in the second act you really didn't need, but you understood it. And I'm watching, so you could definitely tell the break between the first act and the second act.
Oh, yeah.
So the first act was, we introduced everybody. Here come the sky people again. They totally ravaged the land. And this is when Jake and his family have to move. And so what ends up happening is they end up going to a different tribe, which, we were discussing. And so once they get there, then they have to adapt. And I would say the better part of 10, 15 minutes, they're learning their ways, they're learning their traditions, having to, the whole sequence, of trying to breathe underwater, everything else like that. And, then you have the little political side of it where, one of the brother was sticking up for the other brother and, for his sister. And so Jake's like, go apologize to him. He's the chief's son, so he makes good. And then they turn his back on him. And then oh my God, the whale, the whale. I mean, unless you thought, it was just magical how they were able to construct that sort of thing. And then, of course, he befriends a whale. The chief says he's a killer. We find out the backstory.
Yeah.
But there were different separations.
What were you
yeah. Oh, no. So I was going to say this about Spider, that you definitely didn't need his character. I think while he was part of the film, you could have removed his character and it still would have worked. The only reason why they use Spider is for the Sky people to get and learn to actually integrate with everybody and then to start the hunt. And then you see that, I won't say montage, but, about 5 minutes of them going from village to village to village to village to try and find them. And so.
But see, I would disagree with that because I think what Spider serves in the story is actually a very interesting turning point for the villain Quaritch from the first.
Well, yeah, and then so go ahead and finish your thought, and I'll say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the big deals about this movie is the return of Colonel Miles Quaritch from the first film, played by Stephen Lang. Honestly, at this point, he's I think one of the best villains in movies, and he returns in his Na'vi, in a Na'vi body. But what's really interesting, it's not of his body from the first film. It's actually his younger self. So it's he's if in the first movie he's around 50 maybe, here he's in his 30s. And he's a Na'vi, so he's much stronger, much more agile. And what's really cool about that is then as he is coming into his own, he's not the same guy. He's taken from the DNA of the guy that died, but he's almost like a new person that is still kind of struck with the memories. And it gave me a lot of Westworld vibes, because in Westworld they always make robots or hosts based off of other people, and they're not the same person, they're a robot. In the case of Quaritch, though, you learn that he has a son, which was a big twist in Spider, and that kind of makes his character more than just a one-dimensional villain. Now, yeah. I don't think he was a one-dimensional villain in the first film. I think that there was some nuance to his character, but I found it interesting now because it now gives you this, because the Quaritch in this movie is not the same Quaritch from the first film. And I think he's struggling in this movie with trying to figure out who he is, just like how then near the end of the movie, Spider struggles with whether he wants to save this man.
And that's where I was going to go with it. Thank you for the segue. Yeah. So there's a scene at the end after the big climax, and so he has one of the children, he's
Kiri.
holding him hostage. Yeah. And he basically says, I'm going to kill your child unless, and Spider then comes in, and then Zoe Saldana's character basically holds him hostage. And so there's a stalemate for a moment, and so they both let each other go. And I thought at that point, okay, fine. So once the ship capsizes and they're all fighting underwater and everything else, which was unbelievable in itself. And then, so he sees Stephen Lang's character underwater. He sees him about ready to die. And he thought that he choked him out and he killed him. And so he goes and so
Spider finds him.
Yeah, Spider finds him, and he looks at him, and then he leaves. And he's about ready to go, and he's like, fuck. So then he swims back, and he recovers the body, and he swims him up to the surface. And at that point, I knew why he did it, because he spared Spider's life. Because throughout the whole film, he basically said that, at that point, he didn't care about him. He even made the direct comment, well, he's not my son, so he didn't care about him. So at that point, because he spared his life, he then turned around and spared, his life. So,
and there were there's some parallels there, because you have Jake, who is a father himself, and now having to figure out, how to take care of his family. And now you have Quaritch, who is now struck with the fact that he's a father too, and he has to take care of Spider. And I think that is where the franchise is heading. They're heading into this thing where it's not one father or the other. There's really like two parental figures that are going to be fighting for this kid. And also, I mean, that's why I think that it's really incredible with what the screenplay accomplishes with all the characters in it, how each one has like a different relationship with each other. I think there might be a little bit of a romantic angle in the future between Spider and Kiri, Sigourney's character. There is going to be, I think, when we get to Avatar 3, and if they do Avatar 4 and 5, I think we're really going to get into some really moving territory with these movies that will explore the concept of family. And that is something that even watching the first Avatar, I couldn't quite imagine, but now seeing this movie, it's really shaping up to be one of the best franchises in cinematic history.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the simple fact of, so something I really not thought about. I as the movie was going along, so you had I won't say an explosive first act. I mean, because they were reintroducing at the end of the first act, they come in and really destroy a lot of their land, which, Jake and his family has to leave. The second act was very quiet, if you will.
But the second act is that it, as a viewer, it sets you into the world.
Yes.
I think that was, for me, like, I liked the movie in the first act, but the second act is really where I fell in love with it, because once they're going underwater and you're starting to see how the kids play around with each other and how they all have their own different ways of communicating, it really, I think, it also felt like the first film to me, because the first act, I think it was jarring. Part of me was like, I'm actually seeing Avatar 2. And it was kind of hard to believe. But the second act, you really get to live in this world. And, I mean, that is where I think the payoff of the third act comes in.
Well, and that's where I was going to go. The third act, you knew it was going to be an explosive, heavy, fast-paced, action-packed, rock'em sock'em act, and it didn't disappoint. Oh my God, the action. Just non-stop. I mean, it was from the time that they got captured, the kids, it was just everything came together. You got the backstory of the whale. You got the everything. Everything came together as it should in all movies in the third act. But all of the stories started to intertwine, and that's when they were all going to go because they had both tribes' kids, and so they were going to attack. And then Quitrid says, I have your children. He was going to go over. The whale comes in. Oh my God, the whale in the third act was just. Because he befriended him before.
Yeah.
He took out the reminded me of what was the old fairy tale, the one that takes out the thorn from the lion. But so he takes out the thing. Yeah. So he takes out the thing from the fin. And then of course he befriends them, and then you think, he's gonna do this. And I knew as soon as you see it, he was just gonna get some air and just up and over and just started wreaking havoc on everybody.
Man, and David, when that one guy had his arm stuck,
yes,
and it cuts off, and then you just see the arm flying. My theater was like, whoa,
yeah.
And then you see what's interesting about the whale is there's a parallel there between the whale and Loak, who is his friend. Well, because, the whale is kind of like Loak. He was also looked down upon by his tribe because he was the cause of the danger they were in. And that is what happens to Loak in this film. And he is the reason why Neteam is killed. And his own brother is killed because of his actions.
Well, I was just thinking of something that just came to the top of my head. It's like Moby Dick. It's like Moby Dick because these whales have these substance, and you could see his anger start to flourish, for lack of a better word, when they kill the mother. I was heartbroken. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
They just killed the whale. And, they drill up in the brain, and Spider's like, that's all you take? And you could definitely tell, hey, look, environmental. And that was fine. That was cool. It was just enough not to be overbearing or hitting you over the head with it. Because it was like, use everything. Or even that. So it's just a simple promise. You only use this. So, of course, but it was like Moby Dick. I mean, the whale that, Moby Dick was the story, of course, that, Captain Ahab, and he wanted to, kill this killer whale. And it just, several things happened, and it's the one whale they couldn't kill. And that just started wreaking havoc on everybody. Oh my God!
But it's just. I mean, then he saves both Jake and Loak at the very end because it looks like Jake isn't going to make it when he's not being able to breathe. I think so the third act of this film, the sequence when Kiri, after they lose Neteam, which is the emotional moment of the film, it's akin to when Home Tree is destroyed in the first film and Neytiri loses her father and then they lose Grace. Like the death of Grace in the first film is like the death of Neteam in this film. But the difference here is that Neteam's death it affects the characters in different ways. So it affects Loak because he feels like he's guilty. He feels like he's responsible for his brother's death. It affects Jake because he feels like he couldn't protect his own son. And this was the son that was destined to follow in his footsteps. And it's from the very beginning of the movie when they announce the birth of the child, and you hear Zoe Saldana's song she plays called The Song Chord, and she sings it beautifully, and it's about like the kid's birth. And then what happens is you see Neytiri. And it was at this point, one of my criticisms of the film was that I thought in the first 2 acts, Neytiri was not given enough to do, especially since, in the first movie, she is like the driving heart of this film. And she is this badass warrior that is, taking names and, really, really one of the coolest characters, female characters in fiction, films, that is. But then what happens is the first 2 acts of Avatar, she's kind of like relegated to a bit of a housewife angle where she's at home and she's taking care of the kids. And it almost felt like they were regressing. They were regressing from the progressiveness of the character in the first movie. But then you realize, I think what they were trying to do there is they were trying to show you Neytiri as a mother and her trying to protect her children. And then when her child dies, and Zoe Saldana gives a heart-wrenching performance. You kill my child, not my child. And then she becomes something that is just unbelievable and unfathomable to think about. I did not expect this turn to happen. Where she becomes feral. Like she's on the hunt. And there's that scene, if you remember, David, with Spider, and he's like hiding because he sees Neytiri just killing all these guys. She does it so cool. Like she
bow and arrow.
She gets.
I mean, she's just boom, boom, boom,
guy
boom.
with the bow shoots the other guy while holding the guy with the bow.
Yeah.
And then you just hear like, and then Spider's looking, and you feel scared because then he hides, and it starts to feel like the character that you were rooting for this whole time, in Spider's eyes could be an enemy. And sure enough, she does grab him, and in that scene where Quaritch has Kiri held up by a knife and Neytiri has Spider, I was at the edge of my seat, extremely tense. I don't think I've been this tense since I saw Avengers Endgame. And, I gotta say, I had no idea who was gonna live or die. Because, for all I know, I was watching this, I'm like, there's a chance that both Jake and Neytiri die in this movie. Because it was not looking good for them. And especially for Jake. I was so pleased that they didn't die, because I feel like if they killed those characters off, they would have made the same mistake that the Star Wars sequel trilogy did by killing off Luke, Han, and Leia, and not giving them enough to do in the trilogy. And I think that they've done. I mean, James Cameron, he said a number of months ago or years ago that he did not care for Alien Covenant, the movie that was released a number of years back, because in that film, they reveal that the main character of Prometheus is killed off screen. And James Cameron said the point of movies is you never want to invest the audience in a character only then to kill them off in that way. You need to give them a death, or you need to give them a storyline that services them. And it gave me hope that he wouldn't kill Jake and Neytiri off. I'm so glad he didn't, because now we get both of them to continue. And that's another thing about this movie. It doesn't really end on a cliffhanger. It's not like...
No, but I thought it would. Honestly, I thought it would. Because there's, I thought that, because there's a couple different ways you can end movies. You can end them and I always use this reference, but you can end it on something like in Avengers Infinity War, right? Where it's on the point of no return plot point and everything else. And that, by the way, that was a ballsy move on the Russo's part.
Of course.
Whatever you think about that, because the villain won. Or, like the Dark Knight and everything else. But how they ended that film, to leave them on a cliffhanger and whatever else. Or you can do it in such a manner that isn't, I won't say not the best way to do it, but I mean, there have been two-parters out there that haven't really done it well. I think of the Hunger Games. Yeah. I think of, Harry Potter and and those two. And it was okay, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't the best place to leave it. It's, especially in a franchise like this, it's all a matter of where you end it. And I think the fact that they had, one of the children died, they had to have the funeral scene and everything else. And then you kind of see the, Quittridge, come back, and he even says, "Come with me." And now he's on his own. And it's going to be, and the other thing I thought of too was this. You never had a big bad come in, right? Quittridge was really I'm going to equate it to like this. In Empire Strikes Back, for example, you had Darth Vader, and then you were introduced to the Emperor. The Emperor was the big bad, so to speak. Quittridge you never really got the idea that he was a proxy. So I think what you're going to see in Avatar 3, and we'll talk about the future of this in a couple of minutes, is that I think you're going to see a bigger, badder villain come in if they want to do 3, 4, and 5. And so, I think in all honesty, if I had to put money on it today, I think Quittridge dies in the third one. But you're also going to be introduced to a larger, overarching villain. Okay.
Well, I mean, to that point, so you did have the character that he was reporting to, played by this actress, Edie Falco.
Of course. Edie Falco was on The Sopranos. And by the way, I didn't even know that was her until I saw the credits. I went, that's the same Edie Falco that was on The Sopranos? Holy smokes.
She's given a role in this that I could be kind of critical of. I don't know if I was too big on her role. She was like a general character.
Yes.
I didn't really get much out of her. Like I might have to do a rewatch on that just to see where she's going, but she kind of just disappears in the story. Mm-hmm. She's there, and then it's more so focused around Quaritch and the I guess the guys that kill the whales, you can say.
Right.
Which is another storyline where, did you notice, so when they killed that one whale creature, I think they're called Tolkiens, when they killed one, they extracted this yellow liquid from it, which they said...
And that was what I was referring to with Spider, and so he says, well, that's all you take? Instead of... So, usually they sink them. They said, sink them, so... And he's like, Quittridge is like, no, I want to let him know that I was here, type of thing. So...
But the yellow liquid, they said...
Yes, the yellow liquid
stops aging.
Yeah.
It stops you from aging, which I think is going to play a part...
Absolutely.
In the grand scheme of things, because there is an element here of Pandora that the creatures and even the trees, they're all connected through this like network. And it's like this network that is of Awa. And that's like the big thing that they're trying to get to with this series, where the first film had the mineral called unobtainium. It was this electrical unit where that is what supported the floating mountains. And now you have this fluid that stops aging. I feel like there's other elements of Pandora that the point of this movie really is that Earth is dying, and these people are coming to Pandora to take all the resources away from it to save Earth. But what they're not understanding is they're just doing the same thing to Pandora that what they did to Earth. Mm-hmm. And there is, I think, probably in the next film, they might introduce another element of Pandora that they want.
And I think it was you that brought that up, that you said that, we've had air, we've had water so far. So the next one could be something about fire.
It could be
in some capacity.
Yeah, and also what I really love about this movie is it doesn't follow the same story beats from the first film, because if it followed the same story beats from the first film, the villains would have all been defeated and they would have left Pandora. The villains did not leave Pandora. The humans are still on Pandora. So they will just continue that storyline into the third film. But going back just to the cliffhanger angle, I feel like pretty much all the stories are wrapped up in this movie. And even some of the ones that are left open-ended. Let's get to this. So who do you think is Kiri's father?
No idea.
I think it is Awa. I think that Kiri was born by the goddess of Pandora. And that is why when Grace was dying, she was hooked up to the tree. And that was when she was impregnated. And I think that she will be in a similar type of situation to like an Anakin Skywalker, this chosen one archetype. But I think that that is where they're going with that. That being said, though, that was not told to us in this movie. And it was left pretty open-ended, especially with that vision she had where she was like having a seizure and she passed out. And I mean, seizures are terrible. But that was one of the most beautiful looking seizures I've seen in a movie when you see like her glowing.
Yeah, it went completely dark.
Yeah.
And
like,
you just saw it just like, I mean, the juxtaposition of colors.
The bioluminescence of that. I mean, that was also one of the things with the first film, which made it so beautiful. But the bioluminescence of the underwater sequences were just spellbound.
If this doesn't win visual effects at the Oscars, something is wrong.
Honestly, David, I think that they've already given them the Oscars.
Yeah.
They've already mailed it to them.
It's in the mail. We're just going to wait till the ceremony to get it. Okay, so let's talk about where we think this franchise is going.
Okay.
So there are 3 or 4 other films supposed to be coming out in the next few years. So we have this one that's just been released. We got Avatar 3 coming out in 2024.
Yeah.
We've got Avatar 4. And by the way, this is assuming everything pans out, which I think will be fine. You've got Avatar 4 coming out in 2026, I believe.
Yeah.
And then you have Avatar 5 coming out in 2028. Right. So Avatar 3 is going to come out in 2024. Avatar 4 is going to come out in 2026. Avatar 5, which, by the way, I'm on IMDb right now. Avatar 3 is in post, according to IMDb. Avatar 4 will be released 2026 again. So my question to you is, where do you think they go from here?
Well, I think it's all about the children. I think that this is the angle they're going. And I'm so happy, as I said before, that they didn't kill off Jake or Neytiri, because it means that they still have a role to play. But I do think the future lies in the children. And I think that we will see the relationships of the children. I think we will see more of the relationship between Kiri and Spider. I think we will see more of the relationship between Loak and his like girlfriend character in this movie that he liked, but never kissed. That was interesting to me because I thought there was going to be a kiss. There wasn't. Her name is Sutere. And you have, I think, an element of this movie where Quaritch is still in the mix. And I think Avatar 3 is probably going to deal with, you know, how do the humans fight the Na'vi, but now with like bigger tribes. I don't know about the Avatars 4 and 5. Like, I think that is one of the things that I do love about these movies is you really don't know where they're headed. It's
do you
not
think
like.
Do you think it should just be a trilogy? I mean, would you? I mean, I guess my question is: do you think they could wrap this up in one? Do you think he could wrap it up in one more movie?
Well, see, this is the thing. So, as like James Cameron has pointed out, like all these movies are their own movies. They're not like cliffhanger type endings. So I think if anything, as James has said, if the movie doesn't do as much as he hopes, he will add something to the end of 3 to wrap that up. I can see it ending as a trilogy, but I think it should end as a 5-film saga because they've written the 5 scripts. So it's not like the Fantastic Beasts series where they said it would be like a 5-movie saga before they even wrote the second screenplay. And you get to that point where you gotta take a breath and take your time. And that's why I think I said to you a long time ago, I think that this series is going to be what Disney wishes they did with Star Wars because they didn't have a plan and it backfired. Where here, they actually do have a plan and we're loving the plan so far. I do want to give a shout out because you did mention, just speaking of just Avatar 3, how it's in post production. There are 2 people that died during the making of these movies. One of them is James Horner, who he was the composer of the first film, and he did the music, one of the best scores of all time, in my opinion. And he passed away, and they got one of his co-workers, Simon Franklin, to work on this score. Does an impeccable job on it. Some tracks are really beautiful. But also another person passed away that I wasn't aware of. His name is David Brenner. He's an editor. He actually edited Avatar 2 and Avatar 3. Wow. So he actually passed away, I think, a year or so ago. So that was sad to hear. So all these movies will be finished by others, but he is still, I think he's contributed a lot to those films. And if they get nominated for Best Editing, he will be given a nomination. So that is really, really nice to see. But, even going into Avatar 3, they finished 95% of that movie, principal photography, and they basically have that movie in the can. And they've shot some of even Avatar 4. Because Avatar 4 is going to have a time jump in the beginning of the film. Not at the very beginning, but there will be a time jump.
In the first act.
Yeah, and that's where, you will see them start filming that soon, all depending on how this one does. And that is what I'm excited about, because Stephen Lang discussed how, the scripts are all, different, but if you take all 5 of them and look at them as a whole, it's this whole other thing. So,
yeah, guys, we'll see. This is just, if you're watching this, or you haven't, if you're watching this, you know what we're talking about and everything. If you haven't seen this, go see this. I'm recommending it in 3D. IMAX is, I probably want to go back and see it again in IMAX. I'm sure it's just spectacular. I'm so glad I didn't see this in 2D, because it's just one of those things. I go, for the first couple, all the things I'm like, oh my God. It was just amazing.
But I think we can agree, though, David, that regardless of 3D, regardless of VFX, the story is a good story. And that is where this movie, I think, really excels, because if it's just visual effects, it doesn't work.
Oh, no.
A story.
And I think it, honestly, I know Everything Everywhere All at Once got just, swept up from the CCA, just got 14 nominations for this, and this, and this. This has a legitimate shot of Best Picture. I know it's a stretch. I know, call me crazy. I know it's a stretch. I honestly believe this has a shot at Best Picture. I would even say this. This has a better shot at the Top Gun Maverick winning Best Picture. And I love Top Un Maverick. I've seen it twice. But I would put this over Top Gun Maverick. And, so we'll see. It's a good film, guys. It's a really good film. 15 years, it was worth the wait. Thank God we don't have to wait that long again for Avatar 3, because that comes out in a couple years. And it'll be very interesting to see where they position it as far as scheduling. It'll probably be a December release.
Yeah.
And, one thing he was smart about, I think that is, and we'll go here in a minute, is that Mission Impossible is actually, by the way, anybody who goes to an IMAX showing, I didn't know this, but anybody who goes to an IMAX showing will get a first look at Oppenheimer, which, by the way, I saw the trailer for it. We'll do that in another video. And how they did a little featurette for Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning. It's very interesting to me that they're not going to be going up against Mission Impossible. So I can't wait to, it was an amazing film, guys. I loved it. He loved it. It's going to be fascinating to see what the reception is for not only this weekend, but going into 2023. So, guys, go see it. Go see it in IMAX. Go see it in 3D. Just go see the movie. And I think you're going to be just as blown away as we were. But yeah, so I'm not going to go into a lot of outro stuff. You guys know what's coming up in 2023. Stay tuned. Please like and follow us. Subscribe to the channel. Where can they find you on Twitter, Kyle?
My Twitter handle is at Arking Kyle. That's capital ARKING, capital KYLE.
Fantastic. And I am on Twitter as well. And that is Wannabe Rounder. That's WANNABEROUNDER. Guys, hit us up. Ask us questions about movies and all that other stuff. We'll be, please drop your thoughts down in the comments. I'll get back to everybody. And yeah. Okay, guys. So that's Kyle. I'm David. Everybody have a safe and productive weekend, and we'll catch you on the flip side. All right. And that's it. And for David and Kyle, this has been Real Thoughts. Bye-bye, guys.